Joining me now, Ben Rhodes, former Deputy National Security Advisor and an MSNBC contributor. Ben, Israel's staunchest supporters are being troubled in large part by images like the ones we're showing right now. This was a baby in Gaza who was delivered prematurely via C-section because their mother was killed in an Israeli airstrike. That child survived only a short time. Pictures of atrocities do have the power, as you know, to change hearts and minds in ways that can't be undone. Is there a point at which the horror that we're all witnessing unfold every day in Gaza becomes too much even for Netanyahu, who we just heard right now is denying what we're all looking at with our own eyes?
I mean, you would hope so, Chris. First of all, the facts are pretty clear on this. Since the collapse of the first ceasefire that was negotiated in March, Israel restricted all aid getting into the Gaza Strip. That included restrictions on things like baby formula. So that was a policy choice. And so this has been building for months. People have been warning about this for months. They've also kind of dismantled the capacity of the UN aid organization to deliberate into Gaza and instead created this alternative mechanism, the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is, by all accounts, is not capable of getting aid into Gaza or not interested necessarily in getting the levels of aid that are needed to get in there. I think the question now is, in response to pressure, you've seen some kind of half measures. So you've seen the resumption of airdrops of food into Gaza. The problem is that's not going to be sufficient to stop what is a kind of cascading effect. Once a critical mass of the population is dealing with malnutrition, you kind of can't put Band-Aids on that with airdrops, which are inefficient ways of getting assistance in. You have to let these several hundred trucks of aid that are parked there on the border drive in. You have to give kind of unfettered access to deal with the scale of starvation. Netanyahu seems to be trying to balance the kind of far right of his coalition that wants to really depopulate Gaza. They say that out loud, and the international pressure he's under. So what he usually does is kind of half measures, right? Let those airdrops go forward, maybe let a trickle of aid in. That's not going to do it in this case, though. So I think the pressure is going to continue until there's a meaningful distribution of aid in Gaza, if not an end to the conflict altogether.
You heard me say this, Ben. Highly respected human rights groups in Israel are now accusing their own government of genocide, which is, of course, a highly sensitive word to the Jewish people. Does Netanyahu need to explain to the Israeli people and to the world why it's necessary to continue waging this war this way? It seems there's been no clear momentum since the last ceasefire ended.
No, and the military objective, he continues to say that the objective is to destroy Hamas. But at the same time, you have people in his own government, right, Israeli ministers talking about depopulating Gaza. You have proposals to start to annex parts of Gaza. So that raises the question of, well, what is the purpose of this military operation? And that's one of the reasons why you have those Israeli organizations talking about genocide. You had an Israeli genocide scholar write a similar piece for the New York Times. It's harder to determine what is the end state that Netanyahu is seeking here. Hamas clearly is not what it was on October 7th. And so why is the war going on? And I think unless and until there's a complete end to the military campaign and the restrictions on aid in Gaza, this pressure is going to continue. And again, I think the main thing people have to understand here is that, this is actually what a lot of people in Netanyahu's coalition want. And so in Israeli politics, there's a lot of people that want an end to the war. There's an increasing number of people who are concerned about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. But there's also people who kind of want to kind of press forward and literally take the land. And he's yet to reconcile those differences. And time and again, he tends to side with the far right of his coalition because that's what keeps him in power. He's worried about his government collapsing if he loses that far right support, at which point he'd be vulnerable not just to an election, but to potential criminal prosecution, given some charges he faces in Israel.
And I wonder if you see, alternatively, Ben, that this has reinvigorated the idea of a two-state solution. Do you see real momentum building toward establishing a Palestinian state?
Yes and no. You see, obviously, France has recognized a Palestinian state. They're having a conference dedicated to the creation of a Palestinian state. The UK kind of tentatively came along today. It's tied to the conflict in Gaza. So you may see more and more countries, out of a lack of any other thing to do, recognize a Palestinian state. The question is, what is that state going to be? The land would need to be in the West Bank and Gaza. There's increasing Israeli settlements into the West Bank and talk about taking land in Gaza. There's obviously a kind of tired and corrupt Palestinian Authority leadership in the West Bank and a destroyed Hamas leadership in Gaza. So who would lead a Palestinian state? So recognition is kind of the easy part. The question becomes, well, where is this Palestinian state going to be and who's going to be able to run it? And I think that's when things get a lot more challenging. But I think people are just trying to give a horizon of some hope that there could be a resolution to this conflict. But that doesn't get us out of the situation we're in Gaza to begin with.
Ben Rhodes, as always, thank you, my friend. Appreciate it.